that will be given away and I'll grab a copy of James' book. But we got, I don't know how many of you follow the SUAS news, but we have some breaking news here. It looks like a certain manufacturer today received a federal or an FAA type certificate for commercial use. And that would have to be AeroVironment. For sure. That should add some encouragement here. Ted, how did that happen? You know, or are you in the dark?
I don't work for AV, but that would not have happened had it not been for Jim Lee.
All right, so let's, we're streaming, and I don't know if they're still watching this in DC because it's 5 o'clock there, but can we give a round of applause for Jim Williams, head of the UASIO?
Yeah. Because we asked the same thing 5 years ago, but it was no way.
I remember. So this is good news at the Small Unmanned Systems Business Exposition, because really that adds, there's some light at the end of the tunnel, and hopefully that's not a freight train. But anyway, you can read more about it on SUAS News. I just thought I would bring that up since that's kind of breaking news, and it's relevant to our program. So, the next speaker we have here is Dr. John Appleby from DHS, and he's going to talk about some of the science work that they've done with small unmanned aircraft systems. So would you please, let me see here, would you please welcome Mr. John Appleby, or Dr.
Thank you, everybody. Glad to be here, and thank you for the chance to talk about my test program in the small UAV world. Let me give you a little bird's eye view of what it's all about, the requirements that we're testing against, how we develop them, what we're trying to accomplish, and I'll walk through slides without trying to read everyone, but give you a bird's eye view of this new program that I call RAPS. Robotic Aircraft for Public Safety. I'm part of DHS, part of the Science and Technology Directorate, which is the R&D arm of DHS. So we're not the ones flying the Predators. The Customs and Border Protection Directorate is part of that is an operational command. That's my primary customer, as serving their interest in trying to help them with any number of things related to aviation and UAVs in particular. For instance, I support and help and collaborate with them on sensors for those big platforms, as an example. Also, the other one that I serve in DHS, the other part of the Air Force, so-called in DHS, is the Coast Guard. Those are the two big customers within the family that we in our directorate pay attention to. So we are really transition agents trying to figure out how to bring new technology and capabilities to the field for these operational components within the DHS family. That's just the basic kind of job description of what we do in our directorate. We're also part of something called HSR, but that's a congressional mandate that goes back to the beginning of the creation of S&T. The division that I'm assigned to administratively, I have a couple of roles. One is this larger HSR organization, but we're all part of a division. And just to give you a context here, our division does all sorts of things. I'm the guy who worries about pretty much all the aviation and certainly all the UAV-related things, but we're engaged in lots of different technology, transition technology, new capability questions. Can we bring a certain, what is usually certainly in my world of aviation, certainly it's an intel military community development, and the challenge for me is not so much assessing the capability. I usually don't have to convince anybody in airplanes that they might need this new sensor capability, like a wide area sensor, or even the small UAVs that I'll talk about today. They know they need it. My job is to help figure out how to bring it to the DHS world. Because remember, while the technical capabilities are often no-brainers for things that we need and do not have today, there are lots of significant challenges where you don't obviously know the answer as to whether that piece of equipment capability is going to fit in a law enforcement environment, flying aircraft and cones in the NAS, etc. It's one thing to fly a theater for troop protection or perimeter protection, where the whole the front end of that maybe detecting that mover, for instance, is very similar to what we might want to do in civilian applications. But after that detection has occurred, frequently the execution and the response will be very, very different for DHS. So that just gives you the context of what this is all about. Now, let me go back to RAPS, which is the subject today, and tell you a little bit about, walk through some slides that describe what it's all about, as I said, how we engage vendors, how we develop some requirements, what we're doing today with testing in Oklahoma, and lessons learned from the testing today we've already gotten through since December. Did a head count the other day, something like nearly 25 aircraft have been tested. I think it's actually a little more than that. So I'll get through that as rapidly as I can in the time available and try to leave a little time for Q&A. Again, the purpose of this is all about overall performance utility testing of small UAVs. I'll define some of these terms for how I mean by small. Using key capability measures, we're trying to standardize the evaluation of these aircraft, and part of the third-party assessment is an evaluation by us, by DHS. So I'm right in between manufacturers like AeroVironment and potential users in the field, operators in the field, whether it's components within DHS federal or state and local first responder organizations. I'm right down the middle trying to provide, you might say, a third-party assessment of the capabilities. And you can see the purpose is to help, it's sort of, think of this program very much like an underwriter's lab or a consumer reports assessment of a technology or a capability or a product in that sense, where we evaluate it with one test, which is ours. It has nothing to do with vendors. We created the test working with operators in the field, and I'll describe that in a second. And the vendors come and take our test and get a report card, get a full test report in detail, with interest on their part to bring them a little closer to eventual compliance with FAA regulations and rules as they will appear in the next year or two. And also bring the vendors even closer to understanding how their products, their aircraft may fit into what are, after all, fairly complicated, in many cases, fairly complicated operational environments. I'm an atmospheric scientist by trade, but it didn't take me too long to figure out how challenging these operational environments are for police, fire departments all over the country in general. Less than of the nearly 50,000 organizations, less than 1% of those have an air division, air remaining at all. Most of them have none. They rely on large departments, maybe in the city, farther away, for calling air and air asset in an event where they need air support. And you can imagine the limitations that can pose. Just the time delay for an aircraft to arrive on the scene of an event. If there is urgency, if lives are in danger, that right there is a critical challenge, you might say. The small UAVs offer many potential benefits. Some have already been touched on today. One of those obvious ones, though, is the cost is a significant advantage over piloted aircraft. and may allow a small department, I think pretty soon we'll allow small departments of police or fire, first responder folks as well, search and rescue folks as well, to get an air asset at a fraction of the cost of a piloted aircraft. In fact, for most of these departments, they all agree that it is maybe the only opportunity in the foreseeable future that they would have an air asset available. So this is an important potential door that opens as soon as has been discussed, and as soon as this regulatory environment is a little easier and moves a little faster for those organizations to get permission to approval to fly. So what we do is we mount realistic operational scenarios and test each aircraft against these. And that's repeated. It's a revolving door of vendors who come to our test site once a month. Now we're up to, throughput is about 2 vendors per month for 1 week of flying, walking through our 50 test cards, and I'll describe those in just a second. Again, I stress the huge and diverse potential user community that I'm concerned with. This is in the public domain, not the civil, where it requires the COA that's been discussed. And as you know, the FAA they've already taken some good steps toward streamlining the COA process. Ted has had a lot to do with prodding them to do so, Ted and others. The pressure has been on for years, literally, to make their COA process for public agencies easier to use and faster. It's still quite slow though because of, as Gene mentioned, that 60-day. It generally takes a lot longer than that because of the way they count the time that they're on the job attending to your COA application. There's usually a lot more to the days that are required to see it through to the finish. But anyway, we're trying in this program that I've created here called RAPS. The last bullet just emphasizes I'm trying to be masters to a lot of different people. It's just the beginning, the first phase of the program that will help a lot of different communities at federal, state, and local levels. So what this is all about, it's about emotional, scripted scenarios for border security. That's right there in the family of those operational folks that I work with every day in DHS. But then reaching out to the potential non-federal community, public safety folks, disaster response, search and rescue, law enforcement, and I'll talk about those. So we're looking also at operational utility assessments. That's all about whatever the technology is. It's critical for operational folks to have an assessment of how easy it is to use it and how user-friendly, all of those kinds of things. We do everything from put a stopwatch on that aircraft arrives in the back of that vehicle from a vendor out of our test site, and they don't touch it until we get the clock running and measure how long it takes to bring that aircraft out, set it up, get it flight ready and ready to launch, and then how long in reverse to take it down and pack it up for movement. These are critical factors. We do many of those kinds of ease of use activities, including ease of controlling the sensors and getting the image that an action officer needs. It could be the IC for police and fire. It could be a border patrol agent. It's all the same. Most of them rightly are not that concerned and excited about the jazzy aircraft and its sensors. They want a certain type of image. They need a certain kind of clarity of the image. And by the way, that varies a lot. I hope you've all figured out by now that high-def, high-resolution imagery is required and necessary for many things, but for a lot of other things that is not needed and not even wanted. You're aware of the privacy issues concerning imagery of United States citizens and identifying individuals from photography that may be taken by an aeroplane. These are critical things, and in many applications, we don't need to identify an individual, but we do need to see that person and, for instance, see whether the person is armed or not. Is that person carrying a weapon, or are they carrying a broom? Who knows? Anything that is non-threatening, say, to the deploy team that you're going to send out in the middle of the night. I'm looking at suitability for flight in the NAS. A good example of that, and again, we're touching on this in a 5-day flight week. We can't do everything that Jim Williams wants me to do. He simply emails and asks me to do this and do that, and we're doing a lot. But we try to start in all of these three broad categories of utility and notional application concepts. And then finally, in the flight of the NAS directly, it's about picking the cherry picking the really high priority things. What's the number one thing that Jim Williams and his team might be concerned about? When you're at or near the top of that list, will be lost weight for the flight of UAVs in the NAS. Well, what do we do with our flight testing in Oklahoma? Several test cars are concerned with this. Every vendor arrives pretending to look at more mature aircraft that have a plan for this because they know they have to have it, and they will tell us the airplane is going to go to waypoints, there's timing, and it will stay at that flight to that waypoint automatically, autonomously, and stay there for a certain period of time, and then fly to another one, and it'll do something else, and then it will come home if nothing happens in that interim. That's what the automated system will do. Is there a backup? Is it a redundant system in any way? How robust is it? All of these things are critical. What we do in the flight testing for some of that, to test some of that, is simply turn off the command link and verify what the vendor has said that aircraft is going to do. So we're helping a little bit with the things that we know are going to be high priority for FAA. They'll go way beyond the things that we do in this program. They'll be looking at manufacturing standards, training standards for pilots, lots of other elements that I think, in a sense, come as an immediate phase right after we have built up an arc of data and test reports for such a program as this. We're looking at, this is Ted's consulted and kept me abreast for a couple of years now. But everybody knows that the ARC recommended a lot of things for the so-called smalls, and tried to look at early introduction of the smalls of about 25-pound next takeoff weight or less. And that's exactly what I've kind of restricted my test program to for the time being. And that's obvious. It's an assumption that the smaller ones will move a little faster for wider use into the nest than the large aircraft. Even a 25-pound aircraft, you have to recognize FAA's issues with safety, because a 25-pound aircraft can do an enormous amount of damage if traveling at speeds that many of them can easily travel at, and if they just fall out of the sky. So even at that weight, there are significant safety issues. Flight testing under 400 feet is another nod to the likelihood that that new rule on the smalls will probably restrict the use of these aircraft to very low altitude flying. What is that number? Well, it's somewhat arbitrary, but it's informed. It keeps them below, well, the typical altitude of a police helicopter, not necessarily the evening news helicopters that are popping up out of palm trees in Los Angeles County while you're also executing, responding to a law enforcement or fire. So there's a lot of complicated operational environments, but keeping the little ones low will be a first and obvious step toward mitigating it. Just to mention other activities that we're doing here in California this week in pre-planning a special border security evaluation of combining small UAVs responding to a ground sensor network, the type of networks we use every day at the border. So I'm doing a very focused border security application test for down in Camp Roberts. Hopefully in a couple of weeks, but I was just explaining that outside that I ran into some trouble Tuesday with environmental impact people, so I'm working through. So they've come into the picture late after we put all our papers in, and they're asking whether we're able to dig 6 inches into the dirt. We'll see. I don't know. There's lots of rules and regs on Native American land, as there should be, and we put our paperwork in, but boy, they're coming in kind of late. I have about 10 days left, and so we'll see if we get that experiment done as planned in August. I'm also very much concerned with onboard sensitive wood for the smalls. For these little old aircraft, as hard as that can be to integrate, put anything new on these old aircraft, there isn't a lot of real estate and power to spare usually. Anything that's left over tends to go into sensors because everybody knows that's the purpose of flying the aircraft. Spoofing countermeasures, I mentioned these because when I go up on the hill and talk to Congress about programs and the UAV caucus and all these high-powered folks with political authority, these are perhaps the two things they talk about first, and that's while they're talking about privacy. Again, they understand, some of them get it, and they see the potential value of these aircraft in the ways that have been illustrated here with search and rescue. The informed staffers, they understand the potential value, but they are also mindful, and they're getting a lot of pings from the public and from lots of informed organizations about privacy and about these kinds of things. Dr. Howley, how are you going to ensure us that nobody's going to take control of that little airplane and do something wrong and harmful to the public? Some of the answers are the same as are given for the use of a piloted aircraft. I understand that, but also understand that that argument is not enough. It is not enough for a variety of reasons, partly because of the chance that there could be a significant growth in the sheer number of small UAVs, every one of which has a camera, and most of those are HD level, excellent imagery. I think that some of the public perception, just as a side comment, I think it has a little bit to do with that. Yes, there's even a broader context of big government, intrusive government, and all of that. We all understand that, but frankly, it's partly related to what I mentioned before. Consider 50,000 police and fire departments. Many of them already are interested in looking at this and possibly buying or leasing or co-sharing or getting into this business because of the cost. And I think when some of those factors are looked at by commentators, there's a sense that, gee, we already have traffic cameras on buildings and on poles and a lot of places, and there's some people in the country that don't like that. But imagine it's kind of like we already have some of those things. Multiply that by 1,000 cameras that are, here's Appleby advocating a program that darkens the skies with little airplanes everywhere, which has a big camera. So you have to understand there are very legitimate concerns about these kinds of things, how safe and sound, and will they be used with proper procedures and guidelines as our current manned aircraft assets. I think that all is answerable, and in the long run, I think we'll win this argument on good old cost benefit. And I think, as already has been mentioned, I think a lot of it will have to do with applications like search and rescue and fire service response, where the public is much more positive, as mentioned by Gene. So a lot of us have recognized that one may leapfrog ahead of maybe the law enforcement, where people are much more concerned about best practices and controls on the users. By the way, my friends in the law enforcement community, they flinch at these kinds of statements. And I tend to agree with them. They are very responsible people, and they know how to use technology responsibly. Yet, it's taken a larger, the debate on privacy has taken a much larger, kind of almost a political dimension to it. It's kind of hard to gain credibility. There is a chicken and egg. I think we need to gain some credibility with the public and the critics out there. And maybe fire, police, and rescue is a way to kind of establish credibility on all fronts, including first and foremost with the FAA to get the authority, but then with the users and the public. Here's an example of some of the obvious, the notional benefits of, this is a border security, this is within the DHS application world. There are lots of ways that we can imagine and benefit from the use of small UAVs. Remember, we don't have any right now. We're not flying any. Customs and Border Protection, CBP, has played around and tested a couple of airplanes, and they're continuing to plan for that. But the budgets have been difficult, and they've been held off a bit by the fact that, just like with the Reapers, they would have to get a code for every airplane in every location. That's just more burden on their organization. They know exactly what to do, and they have a very good relation with FAA. They have nearly 60 codes now to fly the Reapers all over the country. We have a fleet of nearly 10 Reapers, and they're very specific and very detailed, as you can imagine, for such a large platform. And it's working very well for FAA. They don't necessarily, they don't have the budget to jump into the small UAV arena right now, but the need is there, and there's no argument from their side of the table as to need. It's all about a tactical, quick response capability right at the border. Most of our aircraft are hangared and based and maintained, co-located at standoff distances. In southern Arizona, we're done well to work. For instance, the aircraft are up in Tucson, which is a 20-minute flight from the border. If they launch on request, and they frequently do not, because we're limited in aircraft, limited in pilots, for a lot of other reasons. There could be some weather, but that's less likely. But for a lot of reasons, the aircraft never did that. We want small aircraft that are easily deployed for our response to an AOR within minutes, not tens of minutes. That's frequently the need, and it will help protect operators and really inform the response. There may be a distant remote sensor that has tripped, or maybe an intruder, or a group of intruders, or maybe some dangerous people, or maybe it's an animal. Sometimes CBP and Border Patrol guys have to deploy. This is often in the middle of the night in remote areas. It can take 2 hours to get to some of these locations. A small aircraft with an IR sensor can go out and find the source that tripped that sensor in minutes compared to deploying a group of people in a vehicle. And figure out whether they need to deploy any day. So there are lots of good, solid applications that are out there and on the table. Back to the test program in Oklahoma. I selected a test range near Lawton and Fort Sill, and this is where we conduct the testing. Again, one test in one location to reduce some of the systematic effects of the testing and produce that archive of test reports, kind of like that. It's a database that will help potential users inter-compare aircraft from a third-party assessment. That's the kind of niche that we thought where we could contribute. How did we do this? Real easy. Just kind of created requirements out of notional applications of potential value by talking to senior operators in the field. And that was a good, solid process. Once you vet these with even more operators and get on a national webcam, I did that a few times. Make sure that you're testing potential value applications that, like I said, are not everything that we can all think of, and these operators can think of, but they're near the top of everybody's list. Situational awareness, whether it's law enforcement or fire, search and rescue, that aerial view of the event, of the scene. How quickly can you get there? How reliably can the aircraft move around? Start with that, and how clear is the imagery? How clear do you need it? Like I said, fire applications, you don't necessarily need to really have clarity on a person. You need to know that there's a person down there, but you don't need to know much more than that. So you have a sensor that is tailored to that kind of application. I mentioned the application areas. The RFI we put out resulted in lots of response from industry for about 72 white papers, and in effect we're kind of working through that. We brought out many vendors so far to the field for testing and have completed. I'll show you the bracket of the testing in just a second. We're looking, by the way, at relatively mature aircraft and sensor systems that have some flight experience under their belt because of why. I'm determined to try to bring some capability to the field soon in my lifetime. I mean, I don't want this to stretch out so that we're testing and trying to find the perfect solution for everybody on a big, expensive platform. In fact, it's just the opposite. Most of these operational components whether it's federal, state, or local, they don't have any resources and they have no extra people to apply to any of this. The costs have to be down and the ease of use and all of these things are critical. So it's best in this environment to start with a so-called baby step, to get something going and gain some credibility with users and the public, and then build on that in year 2, in year 3. That's what this program is all about. In the interest of time, let me just run through a couple of slides and round this up. These show you some of the requirements that are public. This is all public domain. These are right in the RFI that came out this fall. And the white papers responded to these. And most white papers just reproduce our table and put their aircraft performance right next to it. We can pick out the aircraft that seem to have good compliance on most of this. I got a few white papers from companies that wanted to go fly a 100-pound aircraft. Right down there it says 25 pounds. So I'm not going to take those folks. I'm certainly not going to take them anytime soon. Just on the list that I told you before. So there are some selections and we can look for compliance on these kinds of things. Wrote the test plan, 50 test cards, covering all of those 3 broad areas, the notional simulated scenarios of fire, police, search and rescue, and then utility, ease of use, and then some things like loss lighting directly for safety, safe flight of the nose. And there we are, that's what we're executing now. It started in November with Lockheed Stalker Aircraft and Ted's former company. AB came out in January, and we've been kind of marching on a revolving door ever since. I'll show you a list of exactly the vendors and aircraft that are on the calendar now. I don't want to dwell on any of this either. You all, Patrick tells me you'll all have access to these slides, and this gives you the detailed location of our website where the reports are going to be archived. We've already begun that process. And so anybody in a government organization can have access and permission by me to go in and log in and read these reports. Obviously, I can't have a vendor reading the report of another vendor. That won't work. It's proprietary. There's test results, but there is proprietary information in our reports also. It's not intended for vendors to see everybody's test results. We will, although stated, I think on the next slide, this just describes a little bit more about how to do this. I'm a sponsor, and I'll get any government officer in on the communities of practice for access. So you can study the process here later and get a copy of the slides. I was going to say that there's kind of 2 levels here. The test reports for the details of the proprietary stuff is protected, fully protected. But on the other hand, I'm trying to write these executive summaries, just a couple of pages, that capture the spirit of the testing results. And in sort of qualitative ways, give a potential user enough of an inkling of how that company and those aircraft performed against our known test that is public domain. Our test plan is out there, everybody can read it. So maybe then a potential user can look at that executive summary and then decide to apply and try to get access to the full report, which is restricted. That's the idea. So the idea would be this executive summaries are public domain. This just shows you the timeline. I've already mentioned that. And the first test report of the Lockheed aircraft has been completed. Boy, did it take a long time. And the reason is to get that first one because that's the template and they're all intended and I need them to all look just like that one in broad format, but also in the level of content, in our narrative that defends our ranking, just kind of like that Consumer Reports thing. Here's our ranking and some short narrative about why we give it that ranking. So that's all in there. Finally, a couple of words about lessons learned. It's going great and we're learning all sorts of stuff. Now some of this you may say, well obviously all aircraft, not one aircraft does well in all scenarios, but believe me, this is really important to know because a lot of operational communities, for the reason that I mentioned, they are so strapped for resources. I'll guarantee you folks, you folks in the manufacturing community, get ready for this. They will take your airplane and try to use it for absolutely anything that they can think of using it for, because they don't have resources for any other airplane. If you try to tell them they should buy yours and a rotorcraft and a fixed wing for that other kind of con-op, they probably may not have the resources to do that. They'll take your airplane because it's cheaper, and and they'll try to use it for all that other stuff. So believe me, it's important to kind of rack this up and quantify it for potential users. That's where we're headed with that. I have some comments that you can see from fixed wing and rotary wing as indicated in some of the results so far. It's been very helpful. We found real trends. Again, some of those will be familiar to the experienced folks in the audience, but other things, remember the potential audience for all this is a whole lot of organizations that are not now in the aviation business, and they need to kind of walk through and come up to speed on assessing aircraft for their organization and helping that chief or that senior manager sign off on an acquisition or a lease agreement or something for a handful of aircraft before they get into the business. Very critical. So that, I think they'll be helped by our reports as a first step. There's a few more here. Already mentioned in some of the imagery, integrated EOIR systems we found extremely important. They need to be integrated so you can switch between them for identifying the target of interest, daylight or night. But certainly in the daylight, that will be one of those other restrictions that is going to come up early. I don't think FAA is going to let anybody fly at night for the time being. That will come, don't give up on it, but they'll probably start with day-only flying. That's why that first bullet is so important. Georeference imaging, IR for chain of custody, this is very important in our law enforcement world. Collision avoidance, I mentioned, and we're finding already that, boy, there are quite a lot of differences, for instance, in how fast the pilot can move an airplane up and down. We hear a lot and read a lot in the fact sheet, but when we get out and test it, it may be another thing. FAA is going to look closely at this. This is one of the obvious things you might want to do to avoid a dead air, but some aircraft move quickly and some do not. There are a lot of latency in how fast you can bring your aircraft significantly down to avoid a mid-air. Also doing some other things. We also do full acoustic profiling of the aircraft. We have an acoustic net on the ground and fly the aircraft over at different altitudes and put that into the report as well. Finally, I'll close with this. There's two tables to show you here. I'll give you a quick glance and you can see all of this. This is public domain too. This is our calendar of the companies that have been out to the field so far. We're through all of this now. You can see the rack up, it's both fixed and rotary. And we've now finished the first aerodynamic report on the 3 fixed wing aircraft tested last January. Ted said he would have been there, but he was off globe trotting or whatever he does, but this report is finished. I should have a check in the box. And finally, up and coming, you can see we have large companies and small, quite a range here. And remember, the goal is mature systems. That tends to be the case. And can we get it right every time? No, we can't. It's based on those white papers. It's informal in the sense it's not a full RFP process, but it is about trying to find and test relatively mature systems that are therefore more likely than the developmental systems to get into the mass and to wide use sooner. That's all there is to it. Developmental aircraft, and I know of many, they can be fabulous, very clever, excellent advances over what's out there today. But if there's only one of them, and it's still in development, and the designers are still playing a little bit with tweaking and optimizing the design of that platform, you know very well, if you know anything about FAA, you know that is going to be a tougher road for approval than an AeroVironment Raven or a number of other aircraft that have flown so many hours. So here's the rest. Did I put that up there? It's right there. The second table that shows where we're headed in late August, and now starting to rack up, as I said, 2 vendors per month to build the knowledge and archive on the web. That's where we are. There may be another RFI for people to put white papers out. That's what I do in Washington. It's all about getting the resources and keeping this program going. FAA loves it, and I think it should be an ongoing program to help them too, to help vet aircraft and bring them a little closer to that level of approval that they're looking for. That's my advisory group. You can see some of the folks there, including Jim Williams and the FAA folks that are directly involved in this. Lots of other people from the operational community. And finally, on the last slide, when you get it, you'll see how to contact me or get access to the results of the reports. Thanks very much.
We're running long, but this is there, you have a lot of good information there.
Sorry I'm a little late.
That's okay.
It's really strong.
So, we'll have a short range. Let's at least have one or two short questions.
Is the test plan available?
Yes.
General public?
Yeah, public domain. Test plan is it was when we got it approved last November.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Out of the 72 respondees, we didn't have the benefit of that document.
What we did was take the white papers and respond with letters to all of them, and anybody who returned to on the calendar, we sent them a test plan, and then there was another group that we wanted to put on the calendar maybe in the second phase, and they may not have gotten a test plan, but anytime you're on the calendar, you're going to get the test plan.
But it's now available.
Sure. Yeah, just send me a note, and I'll be glad to send it to you myself.
Thank you.
Sure, yes.
Will all public agencies be able to use these test results?
Yes.
As a vetting tool?
Yes, any government agency, federal, state, local, any government agency, then there will be some folks I'll approve, and I've already approved a few, for instance, folks at national laboratories who, they're not competitors of Lockheed or anybody else. They're think tanks for the government, as you know, they do a lot of different, they have many roles, but in general, and yes, they have some of them do a lot of UAV testing, like NASA and others, but they're not competing with industry in the production and manufacturing and sales of UAV. That's the key. So yeah, I'll probably have some people from the national labs that are deeply involved in UAVs. And they do already lots of work, like Lincoln Lab does a lot of work for us. Not for me today, but they have. But they do work on border security scenarios of all aircraft. How would you better deploy the aircraft we have? How would UAVs fit into this better? And things like that. Some studies. Yes.
In the COA process, one of the first questions the FAA asks is basically a replacement of what would be an airworthiness certificate. Is this report designed to dovetail right into that request?
It is intended to help, but not dovetail in any formal way. FAA is very pleased with this program and believes that they tell me sometimes publicly I've been to conferences, they say go to vendors, go and take Applebee's, say go take this test. But it's unofficial. There is no way they will release authority from their fiducial responsibility to figure out the UAVs and write the rules and write the regs, and they feel that they do have authority for regulating and controlling and regulating the NAS. They're not going to give that or disseminate, give that authority to anyone else, but they really would like and have a close tie on this particular program. In fact, Jim Williams and I are talking about ways that we could somehow fund ongoing this program to live forever. It won't live forever with S&T funding, because that's not what we do. But we'd like to keep it going. For one thing, Ted's a former company, AV was out in January with some aircraft. Well, companies, large and small, are always changing and improving things. So a year later, that aircraft probably needs to be retested. Now, on the other hand, it could be a very simple crosswalk. A year later, the test report is still there, and the user wants to go and buy that aircraft and talks to a vendor, and the vendor may be able to describe what changes happened from the day we tested the prior block of that aircraft. It may be an easy description, and FAA may just be fine with all of that. We'll see. But in general, this is a test program this kind of test program is needed ongoing. Just as you know, the big national tests, 6 national test sites that FAA is working on, that's intended to be ongoing, just for the same reason. So I'll see if I can keep it going, but who knows? I'm small potatoes compared to that big. This is a multi-million-dollar program, but very small in measure. My team is small, and so we'll see if I can find a way to fund it. I was thinking about trying to fund it, potentially asking user community folks to ante up a little bit of money, and because it's in their interest. And I'm sure that Some would, even if it's a small amount of money, because they don't have much money. There are many organizations